Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in again to Small Town Johnstown. Today, I am Jenny, and I'm here with Rachel,
Hi.
and she's going to talk about herself and, what she does for the community. So if you want to go ahead and start and talk a little bit about Yoga Song and how you got started in it.
Awesome. Yeah, so I've been working in the healing arts for about 20 years. I've been a certified music practitioner and a sound healer, and I wear many hats in that field of the healing arts. So one of the things that I've done for about 20 years is work in hospice with the harp, the Celtic harp and voice. So that's been the work of my heart, is just being with people and being in space with people and offering music as a form of comfort.
Yeah.
So a lot of the other things I do sort of extend naturally from that. And in my yoga practice, my personal yoga practice is not about fitness but is more about really connecting to the larger self, and also connecting to like self-care and community care.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of my practice is rooted in social justice. It's rooted in community care, collective care, none of us are well till all of us are well type of thing.
Yeah.
So a lot of my yoga practice and offerings have been in places where people don't always have access to wellness. And so that's been sort of my ongoing exploration of how yoga can be integrated in community-based settings.
Yeah. And also using the healing arts, like you said, in so many different ways with music and yoga and things like that, and not seeing yoga as a form of exercise, but as a different, type of therapy kind of thing. So where do you work out of, or who do you work for? Like, how do you connect yourself with the community?
Oh, gosh. Well, I have my own program. I do stuff in the community and virtually.
Yeah.
And then I've partnered with Victim Services for about 11 years. I've worked with them doing trauma-informed yoga with survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence. I used to teach at Twin Lakes. I've taught at Cambria County Prison for a while, Torrance State Mental Hospital, Conemaugh Cancer Center, so lots of different places.
Everywhere around here that matters, really.
Yeah. And have done a lot of just community-based programming, too. So I got a grant from the Community Foundation for our creative entrepreneurship to do community singing. So that's another area that, like, linking the music in a non-performative way, but getting people to come and just create sound together. So
like a group singing kind of thing?
Yeah. Community singing is intergenerational. It's non-performative. People don't have to audition, or we're not reading music like we're teaching by route. And some of them are things that I've created. Some of them are come from community song leading traditions that I follow. So it's all, to me, it's all interwoven together. Sometimes people are like, how do you do so many different things?
There's
and I'm like,
a lot. I have so many questions running in my head because you're talking about, yoga and things you've done for the prison and victim services, and then also the singing. So I just want to talk a little bit about all of that. So going back to the singing, what do you guys like to sing, and how often do you meet? And is it the same people, or...
Well, I just had my first one. The grant offers 4 opportunities. I just had my first one at Studio 404 in October. We'll be doing one in January. And I include this in most of my yoga offerings. In the tradition of yoga, there's also a rich tradition of using music in yoga. This is a little bit different, community singing. Yeah, it's for anybody. You don't have to have a background in music to participate in either the music in the yoga setting or in the community singing based settings.
Yeah, that's what I like, because I know when it comes to music and things like that, I'm already like intimidated by you. You said you played the harp and everything, so you have all this talent and ability, and so a lot of people can be, I guess, kind of, like I said, intimidated by someone who...
I feel like that way about art. Of the visual.
Yeah, some people are just like more, I don't know, creative than others, or if you're able to read music, and then I go to one of your groups and I can't read music, it can be a little scary. So
and there's more than one way to access music besides reading black dots on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
And part of my intention, whether it's yoga, music, because I recognize how vulnerable it is for people to come into space and move their bodies or sing, is to be invitational, is to center the community, not myself, and center the community and like in a shared experience that is what people contribute, like not telling people how they're going to feel, but just inviting people to participate at their level of comfort.
Yeah, and that's hard when you're supposed to be like instructing people, being a yoga instructor versus, kind of organizing the community to kind of, heal together and move together versus, okay, this is what we're doing next. And, kind of.
Right. And I think that there's a difference between instructing and facilitating. And
yes. I was looking for another word for it.
Yeah. I try to use more of the invitational language.
Yeah.
That people can have choices and options and how they want to enter into like a yoga practice or a singing experience. So it feels available to people and it's not something that's intimidating.
Yeah.
And in the yogic world, that's called centering the sangha, like centering the community and not centering the teacher, but centering the community.
Yeah.
And that's the way I like to share practice. And it feels like the invitational aspect, I think, has a lot of space for people that might feel really vulnerable and in those types of settings.
Yeah. So going back to the trauma-informed therapy, you said with victim services and sexual assault survivors and things like that differs from, regular yoga. Like what do you change or how is it modified?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. There's choices and options in everything. So if you're familiar with a yoga class that you might go to, for example, at the very end, there's a practice called Shavasana, and most people lie on their backs and the lights are turned off. So in a trauma-sensitive class, I'm going to offer, and I do that in all my classes. I don't distinguish, I might give more information about some of the neuroscience and like biohacks for survivors, but there's always going to be the invitation instead of just the direction to lie on your back.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, that's like, no, that's not comfortable.
Yeah.
It feels really vulnerable.
Yeah.
But giving choices and options in everything, just that invitation for people that have had agency taken away from them. It's sort of like chance to build choice making when you've had choices taken away from you and decision making taken away from you and boundaries violated.
Yeah.
So the language is always invitational. People can be working at their own pace and flow. They don't all have to be matching what I'm doing.
Yeah.
It's mindful. It's not as quick. There's space for integration and to notice what's present in the physical body, the emotional body, the mental body.
And how long do those sessions usually last, and how often do you do that?
Well, the work I do with victim services, we do classes once a week. We have 2 online and 2 that are in person. That's a secure location. In order for anybody that identifies as female to participate, they need to contact victim services. I don't register people.
Yeah, so they just sign up with them, and then that's when they'll meet with you and do the class and everything?
Yeah.
What else have you done? You said you worked with the prison a little bit. Like, what kind of programs did you do with them? So
that was a collaboration. I like working in collaboration with other agencies, with other nonprofits. And the yoga part is just one piece of things that can be offered. But it goes well with places where people have not experienced mindfulness, that maybe lack impulse control, that have a really hard time being in their own skin, that don't have choices in just about anything they do. So that program hasn't existed since 2019, but that was a combination effort between Beginnings, Early Intervention, Family Strengthening Academy, and some other players, but yeah, it was an interesting experience.
Yeah, so what are some of the practices that you do outside of yoga?
My own personal practices, or?
Whichever. We can talk about yours and then the other services that you offer for mindfulness.
I like to think of self-care not just as like something that you do for yourself so you can be a perfect person. Self-care is a means to open up understanding of collective care. Caring, mutual aid, caring for each other, I love classes that are non-competitive, that people can come and feel like their nervous systems are being regulated and integrated and grounded. So I do a lot of grounding. I do a lot of my own personal practice because that is necessary for me to order to function as a human being in the times that we're in. So I'm always, moving. A lot of my personal practice is more somatic based, which is not necessarily looking like a traditional yoga practice, but just looking like organic movement. And so some of my classes have been offering more of those types of things in the class too, for folks that maybe want something that isn't as structured as a yoga class. But that sound work, healing, singing. When the world is too much with me, I go to my guitar or the piano or my Shruti box and just create sound and write little medicine bundles of music and find those practices to be healing for me and finding ways to share them in community. Yeah.
I love that you have, different options for people. And, going back to the choices that you mentioned, if someone, is a victim of sexual assault or they are, serving time in prison or wherever they are in life, at least with your classes, they're able to, have choices of how to move or how to sing or what they're able to do with you.
Yeah.
So I love that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you get started with all of this? Like, where do you come from? How do you become a sound healer and a yoga facilitator
right.
and all of these things?
Yeah, I have a very meandering path. Well, I studied with the Music for Healing and Transition program in the early 2000s, and it's about a 2-year program, and you study in-depth sound healing, and that's where you become certified as a music practitioner. And it's an amazing organization. It's international. I was on the board of directors for 9 years. We actually have a virtual conference next weekend. And the organization, we're required to have continuing education. So I'm constantly learning from the continuing education from that organization. I'm insatiably, I can't pronounce that. I have like an intense amount of curiosity. So I'm always, I have probably well over several thousand hours of continuing education in yoga as well. And I'm drawn to learning from people that can be in this world and be grounded and be connected and caring about all beings, not just themselves. So I'm always learning from other teachers and organizations that I feel privileged to be part of. I teach on 2 virtual platforms as well. One is a yoga collective that mentors other yoga teachers. It's not like, here's the yoga teachers and here's the people mentoring. It's like a collective learning experience.
Yeah.
So I'm really blessed to be part of that. And then I teach on one of my senior teachers' platforms, offering immersions and trainings. So I'm always learning from other people as well. That's always really exciting for me to be learning and growing all the time.
Yeah, I mean, you took the words out of my mouth. You always want to improve and be better and learn more and help as many people as you can. The more people you meet, the more you're learning, regardless. So, any other services that you offer that we haven't already mentioned that I haven't asked you about, we haven't talked about yet?
So I also provide Reiki.
Okay, I remember seeing that.
I do Reiki. And that's been a practice. That's a whole other story. I had wanted to bring someone in that I knew that taught Reiki and did attunements in institutions when I worked full time for a hospital. And I got a grant and all this stuff to make it happen. And I loved Reiki, but I was like, I don't need another certification for something. Long story short, I ended up studying for a year and becoming a Reiki master. And before the integrative medicine department that I worked in sort of didn't last, I was able to train and attune people in healthcare, which was like my whole goal. Yeah. Nurses, doctors. When I was on the board of MHTP, we would go down to the University of Maryland Center for Integrative Medicine and the R. Adams Cowley Shock Trauma Center that had they're the world's largest freestanding trauma center. They had all of their staff, including hospitality, maintenance, everyone trained in Reiki 1 for self-care. So that was one of the reasons I was drawn toward Reiki and working in healthcare and seeing like how easy it is to get burned out and how, going through MHTP and my training in integrative medicine, and as a music practitioner, like we were required to have self-care, and we were required to like share with our mentor, and I'm like, this is kind of patronizing. Then the first time I was with somebody who was dying with music, I'm like, that's why we need to have that really like deeply rooted self-care. But I recognized when I was working in healthcare, I'm like, oh gosh, the nurses don't get that when they're in nursing school. The pharmacist or anybody, doesn't get that. So that's not something else I'm passionate about. So the Reiki, my desire to be offering self-care to healthcare workers is sort of the backwards door that got me towards learning Reiki myself. That was a long time ago.
Yeah, a lot of medical and mental health professionals even get burnt out so quickly from all the people they see. And I could only imagine being you and helping so many other people. When do you have time to heal yourself and take time to relax and rejuvenate? And
and I think if you're not taught that, I wasn't taught that. My mother was a nurse. What I witnessed was work until you're exhaused and complain.
That's essentially what most people were
and taught. I was like, that's not really working. It's not really working. So
you might survive like that for a while, but it's
not sustainable. It's not sustainable. Yeah.
Back to the music element of it, what are your favorite instruments or some of your students' favorite instruments that you use in practice?
Oh, wow. So as a music practitioner, I play the harp and I use my voice. So that's the work that I do with hospice. I'll use harp and voice. And, there's sometimes the comment like, did I die? Am I in heaven? And I usually say, well, my halo is pretty tarnished. So, but the harp is a fascinating instrument to people because many people, it's the first harp that they've seen.
Yeah, you don't see that very often.
I have two folk harps. I have a 22 string and a 26 string. Since they're unusual, and one of the things that's nice about the harp, it might be considered like a soft thing, but for a lot of men that work in wood, they're fascinated with the woodwork and just like the beauty of the instrument.
Yeah.
And it's just very soothing. It's just a really soothing instrument, and I am so drawn to the idea that music can be used. It's not a performance, but it can be used. I call it like I'm wrapping somebody in a blankie with the harp music. Yeah. So that in that setting, but in the world of certified music practitioners, I have a friend in Florida who plays the upright bass, and he sees a lot of patients, and he's been doing that work for probably about 20 years as well. And I think there's a lot of really interesting instruments that can be utilized in therapeutic settings. Probably things like trumpets would not be as, comforting.
Yeah, you wouldn't think of that.
Right. But there's some really interesting instruments. I mean, I play guitar also. I don't play the piano, but I use the piano for learning new music or just for noodling. And then I have a Shruti box, which is an Indian. It's like a bellows, and well, I can show it to you later.
Yeah.
But I use that. I use that in all my yoga classes, and it's nice because you were talking about the experience of creating sound and being vulnerable, and like, maybe like, oh gosh, what's my voice going to sound like? The Shruti box has a drone, which all of the world's music has a drone and different instruments, and the drone can actually entrain the brain into an alpha state if you're playing it long enough. And what it does when I'm inviting people to create sound with me is it creates a container, so there's not just their voice and they're trying to like sound like my voice. There's a space where people can sort of move around with their voice, and the invitation is for them to notice the sound in their own body and notice what sound feels like, not what you sound like, which is a whole different experience.
Yeah. I don't even know that I've experienced that. That sounds so interesting.
Well, you can try it later with me.
Yes, please. No, we have to, because now I'm thinking about it. I don't know that I've seen a harp other than like on TV, to be honest.
Yeah.
So that's so cool. So outside of the harp and, the calming, relaxing instruments, or maybe you love listening to this kind of music all the time, but what do you listen to outside of work?
Well, I love Nyko and Medicine for the People. I have such a wide range of music. I am like absolutely, Leonard Cohen is one of my favorite songwriters. Yeah, I listen to my Spotify. I probably have about 400 playlists. I like to make playlists too.
That's awesome, though.
Yeah, so if anyone wants to go on my Spotify, there's
Yeah.
tons of playlists. They're all public. But yeah, I like Nyko Medicine for the People. Rising Appalachia is like my hardcore. Like I hate to say I have a favorite kind of music because there's so many.
Yeah.
But I really like them. I like their whole vibe because they're into permaculture. They're into like social justice, and they're like living their values in a really profound way. They're down there in Asheville right now in the mud, getting creating base camp for people in their communities. So
Yeah, that's great.
yeah, I listen to them. I like music that they center B. John Sinead O'Connor. I'm still mourning her. She was I grew up with her music. She was also someone that I felt like had so much integrity to her. So I don't feel like it's essential to like know. I'm not into celebrity culture or anything like that, but I like being able to see people living what they're writing about.
Yeah.
And that feels nice.
And something with meaning, too.
Yeah. And then I've worked for Jim Donovan for 20 years in his retreats. He was a founding member of Rusted Root, and he's in a band called the Sun King Warriors. They're releasing a CD October 19th in Mr. Smalls. And I've worked at Jim's retreats for a long time, so I have a lot of respect for him too. He's been a mentor to me in the world of music and community building too.
So you also take inspiration from these people. It's not just like mindless listening.
No.
Because I'm sure you listen to music differently than I do. Because I just, I like singing along. But being a music practitioner, you're probably taking notes and thinking about, how you can incorporate that music and, in your own life and your own practice.
Sometimes. I also am a writer, and so oftentimes I'll have my ADHD focused music on, so my mind doesn't wander, and I'm like sitting down and getting a deadline. But yeah, I love, I know it's not necessarily the most lucrative way for musicians to get money, but I really appreciate Spotify. I appreciate the algorithms and
and it's accessible for people to use.
Yeah, and I love being introduced. I remember back in the day where like Columbia Music House, where you'd pay like $5.99 and you'd get like 16 CDs, and then you'd have to pay so much for. But like for me, living here in Johnstown and not having, that was like my access to world music, because that was something I would do. I'd be like, what's on here that's like from another country or a kind of music that I'm not familiar with, and I would order those CDs. Now I'm like, this is so much easier to just pay
a
monthly subscription.
Before, we just interviewed, Nick interviewed DJ Zabrick, and he was talking about...
Oh, yeah, Zay's great.
Imagine being a DJ and having to switch the vinyls and everything versus just, setting a playlist and having it run. So times have changed for music and accessibility and all that very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So... with your background, are you from here? Did you grow up around here? How did you end up in Johnstown?
Well, I was born in Rochester, New York, and I still have family there. And I lived there every summer with my dad. I would go there every summer with my dad. And but I grew up here, and I left and I came back. And it was interesting growing up here, like Bruce Springsteen. Everybody listened to Bruce Springsteen because it was like that working class vibe that was big part. And but going to Rochester, New York, there was the Eastman School of Music, and there was a whole different vibe there. And I have, my dad just passed away this past June, and I grew up like spending every summer in song circles. People just getting together and singing and learn. And like I remember like someone saying, "Hey, find a different harmony, you're on mine," like that's like as a kid, I'd sit there for hours and sing, and I learned like Irish drinking songs and Peter, Paul and Mary and Pete Seeger and all that type of thing. A little
bit of everything.
So that's sort of like in my blood, that community music making too, and not so much as performance. I used to do performance, and occasionally can still be persuaded and or if I need a couple $100 that I can get a gig. But my heart and soul is not so much in performing, is in like creating space for people to enter into music, whether it's in a yoga class, whether it's in a hospice setting, or in a community song circle.
So what would you say the line is between, performance versus organizing a community circle or doing something for the people versus for a few dollars?
Well, I mean, I like to think like I try to orient myself when I'm performing, and I have two friends that we absolutely love to sing together. We sing like real. It's really easy to work with them. Mm-hmm. Like harmonies come easy. Like just the vibe is really easy. And so if I'm doing a performance, I like to think of the performance as inviting people into an experience, not like, how good can I sound? Or I better not forget the words, or like the
it
chords.
Feels like that sometimes, yeah.
Right. But like that's like ego, Mm-hmm. And I mean, of course you want to sound good, but like if I can get into like the song and like what's in the song and what's in the experience of, being with these people, or what's in the experience of sharing with people that are gathering, that it's a whole different vibe. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that to me makes performance fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what do you see, with the future of, this therapeutic music and through yoga and all the different services you offer, and how do you see that growing locally in Johnstown?
I think, I mean, I used to be the only person doing music and sound healing, and now there's a lot of people doing it. So I think there's a lot more awareness. I mean, I'm going to be 58 years old. I became a vegetarian at the age of 11 in Johnstown, and everybody thought I was a communist.
I'm sure they did. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's kind of nice not to be like the only person, Mm-hmm. I think that there's a lot more room for, when years ago there was one yoga teacher here. She was my teacher, and like it wasn't utilized by a lot of people. So I think now the practices are more available. Yeah, I like though to go in places that I how do I say this? I like to invite students who don't feel like they fit in a typical class. Mm-hmm. I like to create space for people to feel comfortable that might have not had that experience in other settings.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I like that as well because, you're trying to bring everyone in, give a space to the people, like you said, that don't have a space or don't fit in with everyone else. I know you also mentioned in the email a little bit about the LGBTQ outreach that you do and with those communities. So what services, or if you work with any organizations with them, or like what services do you offer, if there's anything specific that you want to talk about?
I mean, I love that community. Mm-hmm. And I've done stuff for Pride of Somerset and Johnstown Pride. I've performed for their music or for their Pride days for the last several years. So yeah, I we don't get to call ourselves allies. That's only determined by the people in those communities. Yeah. So I can't say I'm an ally, and I want to say that, and I like to think of myself as that. But I think that I would do anything to support that community, and offering music is a way to do that.
Yeah, because there's also I guess different types of music for different types of people too. Would you say that the culture in Johnstown for music differs from kind of what you're into, or have you seen it evolve since you have grown up here, back and forth between Rochester?
Oh gosh, I don't know that I'm the person to answer that because I don't go anywhere.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, I mean, I go to music festivals, but I don't really go out to bars or anything like that. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I used to be in that scene as a performer, and I'm just not. Yeah. So I don't know how to answer that. Yeah.
No, that's okay. We don't go out either. Definitely not to the bars. So we understand that. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention, or that I, forgot to touch on? I was trying to make my way around, talk a little bit about everything, but is there anything else you wanted to mention?
I don't think so. I think you did a really thorough job. Okay. And I just, encourage people to check out my website. Yeah. And I have a lot of, I have an events calendar that I keep current. So I encourage folks to come out and participate in whatever they feel their level of comfort. I do want to say one thing about the virtual classes. One of the things that I love that sort of showed up as a result of COVID and going into virtual classes is that there's the potential to hold more space for community in those classes. Mm-hmm. in a typical setting, you have a class that, say, it lasts an hour and 15 minutes. You know, so you have the class beginning at a certain time and ending at a certain time in a physical space, and people get up and leave. And in the virtual class, I intentionally create space for community time. And if someone has to leave, it's not disruptive to the energy of the space.
Yeah.
So the virtual classes that I started in March of 2020 are still going strong. And part of it, I think, is for that reason, is people are doing life together in community. It's not centering on me, it's centering on the community. And in both my Tuesday and Saturday sanghas, somebody gets sick, everybody sends a card. Or, you know, people have lost parents, they've dealt with cancer, they've dealt with all sorts of different things happening in their lives. And both of those sanghas are really centered in community. And I think that is a little bit more difficult to do in a physical space when you have a class that's an hour and 15 minutes and people will, you know, the space gets disruptive if like one or two people get up to leave. So that's the only thing I wanted to say, is that's an unexpected gift that I'm really grateful. And that's why I'm still doing virtual classes, is because that space is able to be held in those in that setting in a way that it's not in physical space.
Yeah, I know people, you know, are kind of 50-50 with the virtual. I like virtual for me because it also cuts down the drive time to get to class.
And in the yoga class, it's like you have your shavasana. You don't have to get in your car. You can like lay on the floor or like get up. You know, especially classes that are offered in the evening. You don't have to like
drive at night,
kill your vibe and get up and walk out the door. Yeah.
So how can people check out your services? So should they just go to your website, or do you have social media or email or anything?
I have an email newsletter I send out, and I try to, like, when I send out my email newsletter, I try to offer, like, I send playlists a lot because it's fun for me to make playlists. I write and blog, so I'll send things out. Resources, sometimes I'll share a book that I'm reading or like something that's relevant. But yeah, I send out an email newsletter, like usually twice a month, sometimes a little bit more. No spamming.
I was going to say, I get some emails every single day.
Right. So. No, not every single day. But yeah, my email newsletter is the best way to get in touch with me or keep in touch with me, because I'm sharing my events that are both virtual and in person, as well as those other supports for people. And I have a website and social media, Instagram and Facebook.
Thank you so much for coming on. I love speaking with you. And I
you.
feel like I learned
excited.
So much about the music practice and healing. So
yeah.
thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me on.
Of course.